Today's gospel opens with a reference to Jesus having just silenced the Sadducees. But last week, we read about Jesus being confronted by a group of Herodians and Pharisees. So, to be clear, today's gospel is still set in the same temple scene that we have been talking about for over a month now. According to Matthew, after Jesus managed to find a middle way between the Pharisees and Herodians, and then refocused the discussion from Caesar to God, these leaders stepped back, and the Sadducees confronted Jesus with a question about the resurrection. Now, this is not today's gospel, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. But to summarize, the Sadducees were primarily temple priests, and as my elementary school religion teachers would put it, they were sad, you see, because they did not believe in the resurrection. Now, what happens after you die remains an open question in modern Judaism. There really is no theological consensus regarding an eternal soul living on as a unique and separate entity entering into a heavenly realm, or a belief in the reunion of those souls with physical bodies in the last days. Instead, the focus is on making today matter by creating a better world for current and future generations. Now, on the one hand, Jesus does make clear in his answer to the Sadducees that there is an afterlife, and his interpretation of the Hebrew scriptures shows that they can be read to reinforce this understanding. But on the other hand, in today's gospel, he also makes clear that what we do in the here and now matters. After Jesus demonstrates that the scriptures can be read to refute the notion that there is only today and not a life after death, and in doing so makes a mockery of a core belief of the Sadducees, they leave. And so the Pharisees return with a question that is not so much a gotcha question as one which the Pharisees debated amongst themselves. What is the greatest commandment? Now, to be clear, they were not looking at just the list of 10 that we so frequently associate with Moses in Mount Sinai, but rather the full 613 found in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, the law. And Jesus answers this question in a very traditional way. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Neither of these were new commandments. They were part of the Torah and often repeated sentiments in Judaism. The Pharisee Hillel is even recorded as having said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is the whole Torah, while the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Not quite the same thing as Jesus, but close. The difference between Jesus and Hillel is that Jesus follows with the idea that the entirety of the law and the prophets hangs upon love of God and love of neighbor. In other words, you can read the rest of the Bible, but if you do not read it in the context of love of God and neighbor, then you are missing the point. And you are not particularly compelled to read, remember, or engage with the rest of scriptures if you follow these 2 commandments. Hillel, by contrast, presents the study of the rest of scriptures as illuminating how loving one's neighbor should be understood. Similar, but also contrasting viewpoints. That said, as Christians, we do not follow all 613 of the Hebrew commandments. I eat shrimp, bacon, and sometimes even bacon-wrapped shrimp. I like to eat my steaks rare, with a blood stain left on the plate. And I wear clothing that blends different fabrics together, including in my vestments. All of this is banned under Levitical law. But we, despite finding our roots in Judaism, have chosen to focus on the reason for the law, rather than the law itself. The core teaching, not the commentary. But in making this choice, we do imperil ourselves, as the Pharisees were quick to point out. We do not have 613 laws and commentaries on each of those 613 laws to keep us in line. We have only these two commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. As Episcopalians, we look to tradition, scriptures, and our own reason for guidance. But ultimately, it is the duty of each and every one of us, acting out of our own free will, to decide how to love God and one another in a complex and changing world. Yesterday, this duty took on a new meaning as the polls opened for early voting. As a religious institution, the Episcopal Church, and I, as a leader within that institution, cannot and should not endorse any candidate in this election. But our faith does compel us to live our values in the world, and that includes in the political world. It is our duty as Americans, as Episcopalians, and as Christians to vote. Who we vote for is a decision that each one of us must make for ourselves. But we are compelled by our faith to vote and to take our faith with us as we vote. In other words, we are called upon to reflect on the characters, views, and policies that each candidate stands for, and how those characters, views, and policies reflect love of God and love of neighbor. We are then called upon to vote our consciences, informed by tradition, scriptures, and reason. How you vote, red, blue, green, or whatever, absentee, early, or day of, is your choice. But each of us has a duty to vote. And when we vote, we are called upon to vote out of hope, not fear, faith, not insecurity, and love, not hate. Amen.